Number 8. Sarah Jane Lodington. While working at a low-security facility in Queensland, Australia, prison psychologist and mother of 4 Sarah Jane Lodington had inappropriate physical relations with 2 inmates and exchanged explicit photos with one of them. It started with a steamy fling with convicted drug dealer Alan Marcel Milos in 2018. Messages exchanged between the jailhouse shrink and her client showed that Lodington got frustrated with Milos' lack of effort in the relationship. She moved on to an inmate named David Gardiner, who used a phone she bought him to send and receive racy photos between their in-person meetings. At some point during the 18-day fling, things went from lusty to romantic. The illicit lovers began saying "I love you" to each other, and Lodington told Gardiner that she wanted to eventually live with him and have his baby. Their plans to someday ride off into the sunset together were interrupted when Lodington was busted in 2019. In addition to losing her job, she pleaded guilty to several criminal charges for abusing her authority and bringing a prohibited item into the prison, where phones aren't allowed. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and could lose her license to practice psychology. Number 7. Emily Dearden. Kenneth Dearden is a prominent estate developer from New York whose life was forever changed in November 2013. When he woke up around 4 o'clock in the morning with a searing pain in his jaw. He found his wife, psychologist Emily Dearden, laying on the floor of their Yonkers home. Luckily, the couple's 2 children were unharmed. At the hospital, doctors discovered that Kenneth had been shot in the face. He was lucky to be alive and spent the next 8 days in the hospital while undergoing surgery to remove the bullet and other treatment for his injuries. Emily, who worked as an NYPD psychologist at the time, told investigators that a home intruder hit her in the head and knocked her unconscious, but there were no signs of forced entry, and the alarm on the family's home security system never went off. Kenneth immediately suspected Emily of being the shooter and accused her of trying to kill him. He said that she was having an affair and that her lover of 2 years was pressuring her to end her marriage. The investigation dragged on for more than 18 months before Emily was formally charged in connection with the case. During that time, she filed for divorce and was relieved from her position as a head psychologist at her workplace. She denied any involvement in the shooting, but took a plea bargain and was convicted of attempted murder. The judge sentenced Emily to 3.5 years in prison and 2.5 years of supervised release. While it may not seem like a lot of time for shooting someone in the head, Kenneth told ABC 7 New York that he felt justice was served. He agreed with the judge's statement on how Emily's actions cost her more than a few years of freedom, including her career, her reputation, and her damaged relationship with her kids. Number 6. Glenn Payne. In his professional networking profile, Glenn Payne describes himself as a highly educated and experienced neuropsychologist with a PhD from the University of California, and for 6 years, he treated troubled children in Brooklyn. But some things didn't add up. Some patients reportedly found his treatment methods unusual, or noticed that Payne talked a lot about himself but didn't seem particularly interested in their lives. Payne also didn't take any medical insurance. Patients had to pay out of pocket, and when some asked for his license so they could bill their insurance for an out-of-network charge, he never gave them the information, and the session soon stopped. In 2018, Payne learned that he was being investigated on suspicion of practicing psychology without a license. He left New York and lived a discreet existence in Las Vegas and Los Angeles, where he allegedly changed his phone number and went by several names to thwart authorities who may be looking for him. Payne's partner, Vernette Tobier, stayed behind at the couple's home in Glen Cove, Long Island with their 2 children. Her former boss, Janine DeMena, would later tell the New York Post that Tobier lost contact with Payne at some point and fell into financial hardship. She began borrowing money from people, and her car was repossessed. Authorities finally tracked Payne down in 2019 and filed a damning 55-count indictment, more or less accusing him of being a complete phony. The allegations claim that he's completely unqualified to practice psychology and accuse him of treating at least 12 patients over a 6-year period. Payne and Tobier were arrested on a litany of charges, including child endangerment, scheme to defraud, grand larceny, and unauthorized practice of a profession. There haven't been any updates on the case since the couple were first charged in 2019, meaning the cases are most likely ongoing. Number 5. Catherine Faughey. 56-year-old psychologist Catherine Faughey was working in Manhattan one night in 2008 when a man entered her office, stabbed her, and bludgeoned her to death with a meat cleaver. Another doctor tried to intervene but sustained serious injuries. The suspect, 39-year-old David Tarloff, had a decades-long history of psychosis and schizophrenia that included being institutionalized at least 20 times. He told police that he entered the office with plans to steal $50,000 and move to Hawaii with his mother, and was charged with murder and attempted murder. Throughout the court proceedings, Tarloff's behavior became increasingly erratic. He reportedly ran naked through the halls of the psych ward he was being kept at and had religious and spiritual delusions. At one point, he was forcibly medicated but showed no apparent signs of improvement. The case was plagued by uncertainty and disagreements about the suspect's mental state, leading to 2 mistrials, including one that ended in a hung jury. During the third trial, Tarloff's lawyers entered an insanity plea and argued that he believed God had told him to carry out the crime, indicating that he didn't know right from wrong at the time. Prosecutors presented evidence that the murder was premeditated and that Tarloff had planned to change his identity and flee afterward. The psychiatrist who survived the attack testified that he observed no signs of psychosis in the suspect's behavior during the crime. Tarloff was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The controversial case led some to believe that New York State needs to change its laws and allow an option for defendants to be found guilty but insane, which is an option in some states. But this hasn't happened, and insanity rulings remain notoriously hard to achieve in New York. Number 4. Michael Weiss and Pamela Buckbinder. Dr. Michael Weiss was working in his Manhattan psychiatry practice in 2012 when a young man named Jake Nolan came in with a sledgehammer and brutally bludgeoned and stabbed him. During the struggle, Weiss fought back furiously and overpowered his attacker. Neighbors overheard the struggle and dialed 911. In the meantime, Nolan snapped a selfie of himself covered in blood. Both men survived, and Nolan was charged with attempted murder. It was soon discovered that his cousin, a psychiatrist named Pamela Buckbinder, was the victim's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his child. Nolan had an extensive history of profound mental health issues and had sought help from Pamela, who agreed to treat him and monitor his conditions. At first, it seemed like he was making substantial progress after years of failed medications and treatments. But Buckbinder had ulterior motives for her seemingly selfless deed. She allegedly convinced Nolan that Weiss was abusive toward their child and lying in family court to try interfering with their custody arrangement. Surveillance footage from a Home Depot store showed Buckbinder buying the sledgehammer that was used to carry out the attack. Nolan was convicted of attempted murder in 2016 and sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. In a 48 Hours interview, he accused Pamela of manipulating him with an awareness that he was mentally ill and vulnerable, and persuading him to assault Weiss with the intention to kill him. Pamela was charged in 2017. She denied any involvement in the crime, but pleaded guilty to attempted assault and burglary in 2022. At her sentencing, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming that she had forgotten to take her psychiatric medication the day of her plea hearing and was high off secondhand smoke from synthetic marijuana used at the holding facility. But the judge said she seemed perfectly coherent and sentenced her to 11 years in prison. Number 3. Stephen Pitt. Stephen Pitt was a renowned forensic psychiatrist who worked on numerous high-profile cases, including the murder of John Benet Ramsey and the Columbine shooting. In 2006, he helped police identify the Baseline Killer, who murdered 9 women throughout the Phoenix metro area in less than a year. When he wasn't helping law enforcement take dangerous criminals off the streets, Pitt worked on his own projects. In 2018, the 59-year-old got involved in a project to educate the public on signs of oncoming violence that are often missed. That same year, he was fatally gunned down at his office in Scottsdale, Arizona. His murder marked the beginning of a murder spree that saw 6 victims killed over a 5-day span. Police identified the shooter, 56-year-old Dwight Lamont Jones, after his ex-wife noticed that all the victims were connected to the former couple's bitter divorce and custody battle from nearly a decade earlier and reported her suspicions. Pitt had examined Jones during the case. Another victim, 72-year-old psychologist Marshall Levine was subletting an office from someone involved in the case and who had previously worked out of the same practice. A few days before killing Pitt, Jones waged a social media campaign in an effort to convince people that his ex-wife was the real abuser. He believed that his ex-wife and several others, including psychiatrists, lawyers, and members of the judicial system, had conspired to revoke his parental rights to his son. Law enforcement tracked the suspect's whereabouts to a local extended-stay hotel where he had been living for the past 9 years. They discreetly evacuated other guests with plans to apprehend Jones, who figured out what was going on and shot at the police before retreating back into his room. Luckily, nobody was hurt. Jones then took his own life, bringing his convoluted campaign for justice to an end. He never faced justice for his actions, which left a trail of needless devastation and heartbreak in their wake. Number 2. Thomas Burchard. When a 71-year-old psychiatrist named Dr. Thomas Burchard failed to return home from a last-minute trip to Las Vegas in 2019, his fiancée, Judy Earp, immediately suspected foul play, and she wasn't surprised when his bludgeoned remains were found in the trunk of an abandoned car in the Nevada desert. According to Judy, Dr. Burchard had started showing signs of dementia, and she was concerned that it would mix dangerously with his generous personality. She was particularly worried that a 25-year-old former Playboy model named Kelsey Turner would take advantage of the senior citizen. By then, he had already supported the young woman to the tune of $300,000. It would later be revealed that Burchard was going to Vegas to end their relationship and to tell her that he was no longer going to support her lifestyle. The car that his remains were found in belonged to Turner, and police charged her in connection with his murder along with her boyfriend, Logan Kennison, and her roommate, Diana Payne. Turner took a deal and entered an Alford plea, which means that she maintains her innocence but admits that there's most likely enough evidence to secure a conviction at trial. She faces 10 to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. Payne denied any direct involvement in the crime and pleaded guilty to accessory to murder. Kennison pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 18 to 25 years. Number 1. Rebecca Lacey Sorrow. In early 2022, 69-year-old Kenny Roger Turk called the Anderson County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina and asked them to conduct a welfare check on his wife, 71-year-old psychologist Rebecca Sorrow. He said that he was in Florida and he was concerned because he couldn't get a hold of her. Deputies went to the home in Lake Hartwell and found Rebecca dead from 2 gunshot wounds. Shortly after the discovery, Anderson County authorities received a call from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in Florida. Kenny Turk had gone to the hospital with a panic attack and told staff members that he had done something to his wife. He was extradited back to South Carolina, where he faces a murder charge. Rebecca's sister, Chris Harper, told the Independent Mail that the family always thought of Turk as a gentle person and believed that the couple had a loving marriage. An Anderson County spokesperson also mentioned the surprising nature of the case, which serves as a reminder that there's no way of truly knowing what's going on inside someone's mind. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a career that involved working with violent convicts and people accused of horrific crimes, or spend months at a time alone as the sole caretaker of a remote and isolated hotel that closes during the winter? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!